All right. Thanks for being willing to talk. I've been excited about this for a long time.
People say, just shut up, Nita.
Not this time. For the record, I've never said that. I would love to hear more about your childhood. What it was like growing up. What are your early memories?
The early memories. I can remember it was probably after Mother and Voyd divorced. And I can remember we were living in this house. And I can remember Mother going to bed with Jeanne and I together.
Oh yeah?
All three of us.
Yeah.
And
was that in Commerce?
yes.
That was in Commerce.
And then after Mother and Voyd divorced, Mother was dating Daddy, the one I call Daddy.
Mm-hmm.
How's y'all's take on?
And after we'd 3 years old, yeah, I was 3 years old when Daddy moved us to Oklahoma City.
Okay.
His brother, he couldn't get a job in Commerce.
Okay.
This was well, by that time it was 1933 when we moved to Oklahoma City.
Okay.
And anyway, his brother Luther told him he could get him a job up there.
Okay.
So, of course, here we went because he couldn't get a job anywhere.
Yeah.
And he told him, he said, now, first day, go to the packing house and the superintendent comes to the gate.
Okay.
And
meat packing?
It was Armour or Wilson's or Swift. I don't know which one it was. Armour's probably is the one where he went. That was the largest one. And he had told him what time to be there and everything, so that the supervisor came out.
Yeah.
So the supervisor came out, and they were outside the gate. He was inside, but he stepped out, and he says, I'll take you and you and you and you. He didn't pick Daddy.
And he didn't get in.
So the rest of them went in, the others left, and Daddy called the supervisor.
Yeah.
He said, you need to hire me. I have a wife and 3 children at home, and we're hungry. He said, I'm terribly sorry. He said, I don't have another job. The only job I have is cleaning the blood pit. He said, I'll take it. So he did, and he cleaned the blood pit.
Wow.
That's what he did on the first day. He went back the next time, different supervisor, didn't pick him again.
Yeah.
So Daddy started looking for a job as a mechanic because that was his trade.
Okay.
And so he went to this service station. It's right there by where we lived. No, we were still living with Luke and Beulah. But this service station had a garage attached. And Daddy went to him. And he said, you need to hire me. I have a wife and 3 kids at home, and we're hungry. And he said, I've already got 2 mechanics, and I don't know what I would do with another one. Daddy says, let me go in there and work one day with you for nothing. And then you decide which one you want to let go.
Really?
And so, and B. Johnson teased me. Daddy and I used to go there to buy our gas. Because he was always so nice to Mother and Daddy.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, he says, the first time I ever saw your father, he had his tools in a tow sack. And he said he probably had a hammer and a screwdriver.
Yeah. How did Mama and your daddy meet?
I don't know. Mother was divorced and probably at town. I mean, that's where everybody met everybody.
In Commerce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Commerce was also where, was it your grandfather owned a house? Your grandparents owned a big house?
My grandfather owned a 7-bedroom house. They built it.
Yeah.
And they had a room for a bathroom downstairs and a room at the top for a
It's the early
bathroom.
1900s.
And she would not, Granny would not let them put the fixtures in
Yeah.
when they were building it.
Yeah.
And nobody could understand that. And she said, if they start shitting in the house, I'll cook outside.
What else do you remember about that house?
I remember everything.
Yeah.
I went there and took Daddy there.
Yeah.
And Jean and I we were sent there, because Mother and Daddy were newly married.
Excuse me just
Yeah.
a minute, Mother. If anyone would like some fresh roasted vegetables and Parmesan, go help yourself.
Okay.
We're fine.
Get some in a
Okay.
minute.
Do you remember what the address is?
Huh?
The address of the house in Commerce?
Yes, it was on Aldridge.
Aldridge?
And
Aldridge.
Park came from downtown, and it stopped at Aldridge, and you turned right about a half a block, and on the south side of the street was my grandparents' house.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know, the last time I saw it, I took somebody by there one time, and the last time I saw it, oh my God! It was, the kids, college kids, had taken it
Oh,
over. And
it was a rental?
No.
Oh,
There was-
no.
There's plyboard over the windows and over the. See, they had a balcony, not a balcony, but a porch on every side of the house. And on the east side of the house was their favorite, because that's where we always took the watermelon of an evening, and we'd sit on the steps, they'd sit in the chairs,
Yeah.
and anyway, that's where we'd have our watermelon. They had boarded it up. You couldn't even see that.
Oh.
So anyway, I never took anybody else by there.
Yeah.
When was the last time you saw it? When was the last time you saw the house?
It was when it was the college kids taking it over. That was probably 10 years ago.
Okay. Okay. So then you all moved to Oklahoma City. What do you
In 33.
in 33, and you were 3 years old?
Hmm.
What was life like there? What do you
Well,
remember about that?
I can't remember too much about it. There was some kids, older kids, lived across the street, and they would tumble. And I loved to sit out there and watch them tumble.
Yeah.
They would jump up in the air and just turn the flips
Yeah, yeah. Like on the ground or like in the air?
from the ground.
Okay.
But I mean, they
They'd
do
do
the
flips in
flips
the
in the air.
Woo. Wow.
They must have been taking some kind of a class or something. I
Okay.
don't know.
What did you do for fun? What were
I
you
don't
interested
recall
in?
ever having any fun. I do recall that I came down with Linda. What did I have? What disease?
Huh?
What disease did I have that Daddy went to B. Johnson and borrowed 25?
Diphtheria.
Yeah, diphtheria.
Okay.
We had been to Commerce and spent our time down there, and we had come back, and I almost immediately came down with diphtheria,
Yeah.
and that was just really a deadening disease
Right.
at that time. And Daddy went to B. Johnson, his boss, and told him what was going on and wanted to borrow $25
Yeah.
because B had given him the name of a doctor, and Daddy called that doctor, and he come out there and looked at me. He said, the only thing I can do for her is to give her a shot. And he said, but that shot costs $25 and I don't have it.
That was a lot.
And $25 was like 2 or 3 months pay from anybody.
Wow.
So anyway, he loaned him $25. The doctor came back brought the shot and gave me a shot in the stomach. And as he started out, he turned around. He said, "She'll be a dead or alive in the morning. Well or dead in the morning." And when he walked out there, mother said, "Go get a doctor." He said, "We don't have any more money, and I can't borrow another $25. And he said, "Let's just wait and see what happens." And I remember sleeping between Mother and Daddy, and I had a knot on my stomach. I remember that, and every time I turned over, it hurt.
Yeah.
And I'd wake them up. But not on purpose, but I'd cry.
And so in the morning, what was the result? Were you?
I was well.
Do you remember waking, like, feeling better the next day?
I was well the next morning. I
Wow.
wanted to get on the plane. And Jeanne came down with it the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, Daddy had to go back to B and borrow $25 more.
And he did? He was able to?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he loaned him another $25.
What were your parents like?
Well, I think it's.
What
I
were
mean,
my parents?
Yeah, what were they? I mean, like, they pulled out all the stops to take care
Save
of
us.
you.
Yeah, they did everything.
Yeah.
But
Were they? How were they as a mother and father? Like, what do you remember about them when you were young?
well, all
kind,
I
were they
know,
strict,
all,
were
all I can remember is not having any money.
Yeah.
Because I can remember one time, Mother used to take for a nickel. Mother could ride the bus. Children could ride free. And the grocery store, she had to ride the bus. They didn't have a car.
Yeah.
And so anyway, she would pay her nickel and ride the bus to the grocery store and take the 3 kids with her because there was nothing no place to put them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she'd go in and buy her groceries and come back and get back. It'd make us stand out there with the groceries till she got all of them. And then we'd get on the bus and come back home. And I remember Mother saying, "I'd just give anything if I just had one more nickel." She said sausage was 50 cents. Was 5 cents a pound. Because Mother was wanting, wishing she had a nickel.
Yeah.
And she didn't. She'd already spent all she had to buy what she had to have.
Yeah.
Except the nickel to go back on the bus.
Yeah.
So
And what do you remember about your father in those days?
about what?
About your daddy?
Oh,
he-
Daddy was very quiet.
Yeah.
And he was good. He never denied us anything.
Yeah.
Even as growing up, if he had it, he would, say, "Mother, go get that.
Yeah.
Go get it." So he'd bring the money home to hand it to Mother, and Mother managed all the money.
Yeah.
And
Were they strict? I mean, were they have a lot of rules, that kind of thing? Or-
not that I recall.
Yeah.
Can you tell him the story you told me about your biological father pulling up in the car when you were 2 in Commerce?
Oh, I was down at Granny's. I was about 2 years old, and they hadn't been divorced too long.
Yeah.
But Edna, the kitchen window was up. It was on the second floor, it looked like, because their basement, they wasn't a basement, it was just the, what do you call it,
Crawl
foundation.
space. Okay, yeah.
Foundation was real high out there, and Edna was looking out. The kitchen window just happened to be looking out. And there was a car pulled in and parked right under the kitchen window, and Edna saw it. And Voyd got out of the car, and I ran to him. I knew him,
Yeah.
and so he grabbed me, and Edna saw that he was up to no good when he pulled in there.
He was coming to take you.
And he was wanting to steal me.
Yeah.
And he grabbed me under the arms like this, and Edna got there in time to keep him from getting me in the car. And she got my legs. And so she was pulling the legs And he had me under the arms, and Edna was hollering to Granny, call the sheriff, because the sheriff was my grandfather's best friend.
Yeah.
So he got there in a hurry. And so anyway, he told him, he said, don't you ever try that again. You're going to jail.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he didn't. But Mother would let us go to Boyd's parents' house
Okay.
ever so often. And we went out there, or he took us out there one time. I don't recall being taken out there. It was nothing to me, because it's something I did all the time, apparently.
Yeah.
And anyway, Granddaddy saw Mother. And he said, when are you going after girls? She said, I'm not going to go get them. Said, Boyd will bring them home tonight. And he said, if you don't go get them, I'm going after them.
Mm.
He said, the word is around town, he will kill them before you get them back. And so Granddaddy had already had the sheriff with him. They went straight to their house and got me. And he never tried it again. The sheriff gave him a hard talking to.
Yeah. What was Voyd like?
I don't remember much about him.
How did you see him very often after that?
After that, I saw him one time, and I must have been. I was still in upper grade school.
Okay.
And there used to be a charm bracelet that had hearts on it, and you would buy the hearts to go on this.
Yeah.
And of course, I couldn't buy the hearts. Edna was by aunt. She was older than Mother, and she was a school teacher, and she always came home for the summer, and then she'd go back to school. And so anyway, when she'd come home for the summer, Jeanne and I were usually there for the summer, because that's what Daddy and Mother would send us, because they were just really newly married. And so anyway,
we were talking about.
I'm not mad.
No.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. We were talking about when you would have seen Voyd again.
So
after
anyway, Edna says, the big deal there was to go to town and park on the square on Saturday night and watch the people go by.
Okay.
So that's what we did. And Edna says, you girls, come on, I'll get you a heart for your bracelet. And that was a big deal. You go to the dime store, probably a nickel.
Yeah.
And I must have been in upper grade school. I mean, probably fifth, I'm guessing fifth.
Yeah.
And so we went in, and she bought my heart and everything. I don't know where Jeanne was. I don't know. She would have gotten a heart too, but I don't know.
Okay.
But anyway, Edna and I came out of the dime store, and we were walking to the car. Granny was sitting in the front seat of the car just looking around people.
Yeah.
And Voyd and two men were standing there at the curb. And as we passed, Edna said, do you know who that is? And I just said, yes. That's all I said. And he looked at me and he said, how's your mother? And I said, Mother and Daddy are just fine. And we got back to the car, and Edna got in the car, and she busted out laughing. And she started telling Granny what was wrong. She said, and Nita says, Mother and Daddy are just fine. And that was our conversation.
And that was it.
He didn't have anything to say to me. I didn't have anything to say to him.
And he didn't come around.
Never
any
saw him
after
again.
that? You never saw him
And
again.
Jake, Mother's brother, lived in Oklahoma City. And at that time, Papa and I, that's where Alan was born, on 61st Terrace there in Oklahoma City. And Jake used to come in. Lauren worked evenings a lot of times, and he'd come out to our house. about supper time, because he'd think he'd get a free meal cooked, which he did. But anyway, one night he came out there and he just wanted to talk, and he was a talker anyway. He said, Nita, you ought to go down and see Voyd next time you go to Commerce and go see him.
Yeah.
I said, Jake, why in the world would I go see him? And he said, well, he's your father. I said, you say he's my father. I don't realize that. He never gave me a Christmas card, a birthday card, a phone call, or nothing my whole life. And I said, to me, he's nothing.
Yeah.
And then when we lived in Chicago, Irene sent me the clipping where he had died, and that was his funeral. And he was about 65, I think.
Okay.
What year was that? Approximately when y'all were in Chicago.
The kids, Alan was in the 8th grade,
Okay.
and Voyd was 65 when he died.
Okay.
So then late 60s? I think Alan was born in
Alan-
58.
Alan in 8th grade. Alan would have been 13, born in,
Early 70s, maybe?
what year was Alan born?
Well,
58.
but Alan was in the 8th grade then.
Yeah.
I remember that because Ray never wanted me to work because he wanted me to be home when the kids got home from school.
Yeah.
Because he said, Nita, he said, that's the best thing we can do for them, because he said, every time they get settled somewhere, we move them. And he said, we got to have some sort of stability. Anyway, that's the way it was.
Yeah.
And
Tell me about Jeanne when y'all were growing up. What was your relationship like? What was she like?
it was just a casual relationship. We weren't really good friends.
Yeah.
We did what we had to do together, if no one else
You
was
didn't
around.
much care for her.
No, I never did. I never did really care. The reason I can't stand people that are think they're so good. What am I trying to say?
Arrogant
Arrogant.
Yeah.
and lazy. That's what you told me, and that's what I saw.
That's what I remember from stories that you've told, is that
She would lay on the couch.
you did chores, you had to help with all this kind of
I
stuff.
didn't have to. We would come home from vacation for 2 weeks. I walk in the door and Mother said, "Oh, you're just in time. I've got an apartment up there. It's got to be cleaned." Jeanne lived right there. She stayed right there in Oklahoma City after she and her husband divorced. She never cleaned an apartment. She never helped. If she did anything at all, she was paid. I spent 1 week of my vacation cleaning the damn apartment, and of course I wasn't given a dime. I mean, it was expected of me, but
Yeah.
not of Jeanne. Or Jan. Jeanne and Jan both were always paid. I was never paid them a dime.
You were talking about the apartments. When did your parents start those apartments? When did that begin?
Billy had been in the service, and he'd gotten married before he got out, just before he got out. And when they got out, they came home. They moved into Mother and Daddy's. Okay. Then Jeanne got married.
Billy being Wilma, your mom?
Huh?
Billy meaning Wilma, your mother?
No. Billy, he was Daddy's child when he came into the marriage. He was in my previous marriage.
Okay. How old was Billy? Older than you?
He was older than me, but he was about half my size. They say that his mother never gave him anything to eat except Post-Toasters. That's what he liked. That's what he got. 3 meals a day. Mother wouldn't give him Post-Toasters for nothing. She'd put food on the table and see that he ate it.
What did you think of Billy?
Not much. I mean,
Yeah.
Billy depended on me. There was something else I was talking about that I wanted to finish.
Oh, we were talking about the apartments.
Oh,
Oh yeah, when y'all took that over
And
the three
then-
apartments above the garage.
yeah, Billy came home, moved into Mother and Daddy's. Jeanne got married. Well, they lived at his grandmother's house. Well, Jeanne, that was in December. Well, I was going to get married in June. But in February, Jeanne divorced. That was her first marriage. And then
This would have been late 1930s. No, not late 1940s, because that was after the war.
we were married in 47.
Yeah.
No, 48.
48, because yeah, you were 18.
47 is when I graduated from high school. And anyway, what was I telling before that?
I'm getting confused now too.
We're talking about the apartments.
Oh, the
Okay.
apartments, and Billy moved back in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's when Mother and Daddy decided to build those apartments back there because the lot was long enough that they could go.
Yeah.
And so they built 3 apartments up there. And that's where we had to live. He said, we didn't have room for everybody in the house. It looked like that's where they wanted to come. We couldn't afford to go anywhere else. We couldn't afford an apartment.
Yeah. You and Ray lived in those apartments right after you got married? Yeah.
Well, everybody, all 3 of us did.
That's a lot of family in one
Billy
place.
and Mary moved into one apartment. We had to draw straws to see who got which. Well, I got the one on the I'm thinking it was the west. I got the
Okay.
one on the west, but it was shaded by a tree, so I didn't get any sun. Jeanne got the middle apartment, and Billy got the other apartment on the street over there, the side street. They
Mhm.
got all the traffic. I got the best one.
Yeah.
Yours was the best in the summertime, I imagine.
I bet.
It was best ever time.
Yeah.
So anyway, now what else?
This was the house that I remember Mama in, right?
Yeah.
Pink. At least it was pink when I remember it, when it was.
Oh yeah, Mother loved pink, and
Yeah.
everybody, all real estate agents says, people won't buy pink. She don't care. She loved it.
Yeah.
She loved pink.
Well, I guess she never needed to worry because she never sold it, right?
No. What else?
What were some of the other stories? Maybe I passed on some to you. Definitely wanted the Voyd trying to kidnap her, because that's a wild story.
Yeah.
What else?
You and Papa meeting. You and Ray.
Oh, yeah, at the bar.
Oh,
And- yes.
well, no, it wasn't a bar. There
It was a
were
hamburger
two
joint.
dance halls, one here and one over here. And back here was a little bitty shack deal that sold hamburgers. So when I was a senior in high school, and there were about 18 of us on Saturday night would go out to dance here. And we just danced, no one was really paired up or anything. And we just danced with each other. So we were out there, well, about 11 o'clock. I hadn't eaten supper. And I was hungry, so I told this friend of mine, I said, I'm hungry. She said, I am too. I said, I didn't eat. She said, I didn't either. And I said, let's go get a hamburger. So she said, okay. So we went over here to the hamburger place and we ordered a hamburger. And we went over and sat down and we're eating it. And here come these 3 men. One was so good looking. And so what they do, they went to the bar and ordered beer. And they got the beer and came over like they were going to sit down. And they said, this isn't open. And they said, how do you open this? This isn't open. And very nicely, I just said, you're not allowed to drink beer in here. They said, how do you open it? I said, there's an opener on the tree outside. They went out there and opened it and brought their beer back in there and sat down with us, started talking. And so anyway, they want to know where we were. And we said, well, we were over here at this dance hall. They'd been over here. And so anyway, they didn't say anything about going over there. We left pretty soon. And we went over there and sat down and started dealing with our group. Wasn't any time all three of them came in there. Ray came over and asked me to dance first thing. Everybody was looking at me and him, wondering what in the world, did I know him or what's going on? And so I danced with him. Well, he grabbed a booth over here. The three of them did, and come back, and Ray would scoot me into the booth and sit down on the outside. And Smitty which wound up our best man.
Yeah.
Smitty would ask me to dance. And Ray would say, I just asked her. He said, come on. And he'd pull my hand, we'd dance. I'd get back in there. Smitty had asked me to dance. Ray said, I just asked her. Lie, he hadn't asked me. And that was on Saturday night, and I had a date with him. He asked me if he could come, if he could pick me up on Tuesday. I said, yeah. So that was it.
And which one of those three guys was the good-looking one?
Yes. I'm not going to tell that. I'm not going to tell that.
And then how long did you all date?
Oh,
before?
I met him on my birthday, my 17th birthday.
That was when you were out at the dance hall.
Yeah, that
was your 17th birthday.
And anyway, that's when I met him. And he always said, that was the best birthday present you'll ever get. And he'd always say that. I've already given you your birthday present.
What did you like about him when y'all were first dating?
Just everything.
Yeah.
He was so nice and so sweet and so good looking.
Can you tell him about the French girlfriend that he had from the war?
Yeah, when he was overseas in France 2 years, Army of Occupation, and he met a French girl.
Do you know where in France he was stationed? That's okay.
I think he probably told me many times, but that's gone. It wasn't important to me.
Yeah.
And but he was with a sergeant, and the sergeant had a Jeep. And so he'd say, take me into town. So Ray would take him into town, then he had the Jeep. So anyway, I was going to tell something else. Oh, anyway, this girl I know was older than he was, but the whole time she wanted to come to America. And Ray knew he wasn't going to marry her. He hadn't met me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because that was after he came back.
But he just knew he didn't want to bring her back here. She was older than he was and everything. She was just something, a trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember what her name was?
No.
Okay.
That I didn't worry about either.
Yeah.
Just half a world away. And he was over there after the war ended?
Oh, yeah. He was Army of
For
Occupation.
occupation.
So he was drafted as the war was ending?
He and a bunch of he and three others from high school joined while they were still in school. And they told them, we'll take you, but not till you graduate.
Okay.
Good.
So just as soon as they graduated, they were in.
Okay. Because he was born in 27, which means he would have been 18 in 45, right? Which is when the war ended. Okay. So he was in France for 2 years.
Well, basically, I mean, he had some Army deal here, and he'd go over there, and he came back. But he got out at Christmas time.
Okay.
before I met him in April. And so he was at home, and he enrolled at OU in an accounting class or something. I don't know. It's probably some kind of math.
Yeah.
And anyway, he was enrolled in that. And Smitty was working at a grocery store. But anyway, they came up, and that's when I met him. And so Smitty got a date, and then Ray had a date with me. And Ray was a lawyer, in school for a lawyer. Smitty was going to be a doctor. Neither one of them knew what the hell they wanted to be. But they were impressed. They were impressed, and they thought we'd be impressed. I said, I've been working for a lawyer almost ever since January. I said, he hired me to help with type up the income tax that people come in, and he'd he'd fill it out hand, and then I was supposed to type it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, and he said, scared the hell out of him. He said, I was afraid she knew something.
And then you got married when you were 18?
I was 18.
You were 18. So you dated for about a year?
Just about a year and a month. Well, like from April to June 1st.
Yeah. And what was your wedding like?
At home.
You did it at home?
At which home? The one
At Mother's.
Okay, the apartment above the garages? Yeah. Okay.
They weren't even
in the
finished.
house.
Oh, in the house.
Yeah, the 3 apartments were above their garages.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
But they weren't finished yet.
Oh, okay.
Billy was there. Jeanne was there. And Mother always teased me. She put a mattress under the dining room table. That's where we slept.
Are you serious?
I mean, they only had 3 bedrooms,
Yeah.
and Jeanne got one. She didn't have to share. She was divorced, and she was always the preferred one.
So she got a bedroom.
She got a bedroom.
Even though it was just her, you and Ray.
And Billy and Mary.
And you and Papa had to sleep under the dining room table.
Uh-huh. She always said, we got our honeymoon at the dining room table.
What did your
I did not
parents...
know that.
Huh?
You had to sleep under I didn't know that. While the apartments were being built?
Yeah. They were mostly pretty well built when we got married. Daddy would come home from work and go out there and work till dark.
Mm-hmm. What did your parents think of Ray?
I don't think they thought too much of him. I mean, he didn't talk much then. He talked to me. He was a big talker to me, but he didn't talk to them much unless they asked him something.
Mm-hmm.
And
They came around,
but
didn't they?
yeah, they came around. He was the preferred child.
And then what were those? When did you leave Oklahoma City? When did you start moving?
After Ray and I married, let me think. There's a pause in there. We bought a home. We bought a home out on.
No, you all moved to either Sioux City, Iowa, Lima, Ohio, or Lawrenceburg, Tennessee.
No, not yet.
You didn't buy the home until I was about 3.
Well, Alan was born there.
But after you all got married, you moved away. Because I was not born. You moved.
We didn't move away till Daddy went to work for Swift and Company.
Right.
And the reason he went to work for Swift and Company is his aunt's husband was a food and drug inspector, and he got Ray a job. When Ray graduated with an accounting degree, accountants were a dime a dozen. I was making $125 a month, and they offered Daddy $135 to go to work with this accounting degree. And he thought he was worth more than that, and I think he was too.
Wow.
And so this uncle found a job for him with Swift and Company in the dairy and poultry division. And it was starting round low, but it stepped. And they wanted to teach him stuff and put him up higher.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's what he took. And that's when we first moved to Trenton, Missouri.
Okay.
And I think we were there 2 years, and they moved. Then they wanted to move us to Tennessee. That's where Linda was born.
And that's where she was born.
And then they moved us to Lima, Ohio. And then they had sold the government some bad cheese.
Bad government cheese.
And so they were having to fire everybody. But they didn't want to fire Ray because he wasn't there when they sold the cheese, and they wanted to keep him. And so that's when they moved us to Sioux City, Iowa, Sioux City.
Okay.
And then that's the only time I ever said I was going to leave my husband, because he would come home every night drunk. He had 3 brothers, and every one of them were an alcoholic. And when he'd come in drunk, he just had to go to bed. And so I got to thinking about it. We had a 2-bedroom place, and we had a bed about like that in there, and that's where Linda slept, and I slept with her. So
Hang on, babe.
Anyway, after I'd complain about it every night, and it didn't do any good next night because the boss wants me to. Boss insists on me going.
He was going out drinking with his boss.
And I said, okay. I said, when we go home Christmas, Linda and I are staying, and I'd like to take the furniture. He never come home drunk again. And he said, I don't even like this job. And I said, I don't even like living here. He said, what in the hell are we doing here? So he quit his job, but if he would work one day past the new year, he could get a full month's pay. So we put our furniture on a U-Haul trailer, and we moved it all to Oklahoma City. And Linda and I stayed with the furniture, and he could get money back by taking the trailer back to Sioux City, Iowa. So he drove the trailer back and turned it in. And our landlord, we were on the main level then, and the landlord had built himself an apartment upstairs. And then there was a couple that lived in the basement down here. And so Ray went back, and the landlord said he could live with him and he wouldn't charge him.
Yeah.
And so anyway.
And he worked his one more day.
That one day passed, and he got that money.
And then quit.
I mean, we were really pinching it.
Yeah.
That's a good, to get a month's pay for working one day is
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's smart. So then, okay, so at that point, y'all moved back to Oklahoma City.
And that's, we didn't immediately buy a house. We were living in the apartment. No, we weren't. Oh, no. I don't know where we lived. That's a long time ago, Daniel.
And so it was because Alan was born in
No.
Oklahoma
we bought
City.
the house.
We moved back to Oklahoma City, and they rented a house down the street from
Yeah,
Mama and Papa.
That's right.
On Birch.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And I was about 3. That was the
No,
first,
you were 2.
Okay, I was 2. But that's
Barely.
my first recollection of meeting my grandmother, Mama, who I realized that she was just down the street. I put that together in my little head, and I had a tricycle. And one day I got on my tricycle and I was going to go see that lady who liked me so much.
Uh-huh.
That's just all I remember. She liked me and she just kept kissing on me, and I'm going there. And this one had a hold of my seat.
You stopped her from
It felt to me
going?
like I had gotten all the way down the block. It was
Yeah.
probably like 5 feet.
Right.
Well, you don't know. Of course, they wasn't too worried about kids being stolen back in those days. But still, I didn't want her running off. Don't tell her where she'd go.
Yeah.
Well, actually, when we lived in Sioux City, there was a little girl born across the street that would come over to our house all the time and play with Linda. And she would take her to this friend's house that was about 2 blocks away. Well, I didn't realize that's where she was going. But anyway, and one day I let Linda go out in the backyard, and she disappeared. Well, there was an article in the paper. Somebody had opened a window by a baby's bed and stolen the baby. And man, I was scared to death. I was bawling.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know where in the world she could have gone if she hadn't gone to that girl's house. I didn't even know where she lived. I knew she went down to the corner and turned and started up the street. And so I did. And they were bringing her home then.
Well, I bet you were mad at her.
And I spanked her.
You spanked me?
You bet I spanked you.
And how old was I?
2.
Wrong move.
That wasn't, I didn't beat you. I didn't beat you.
Well, I didn't know.
But you'd gone all by yourself. You knew you weren't supposed to get out of the yard.
I didn't know that at 2.
2.
Yeah, I did.
Let me think about it. Yeah, it was when you were in Lima, Ohio. You got your first birthday. You weren't even 2 years old. You were just 1. Because you got your, I don't know where you got your second. I think you were in Oklahoma City before you got your second birthday.
And then so Alan was born in Oklahoma
Well,
City.
4 years later.
Right.
But we bought a house.
Okay.
Alan, Ray went to work for,
Keep talking. I'm just grabbing some food.
I was trying to think who he had a bunch of jobs. Oh, when we moved back to Oklahoma City, this couple that we ran around with, she was from El Reno, Oklahoma, but he was from Trenton, Missouri. And so anyway, they had moved back to Oklahoma City. And when we moved back at Christmas time, he called Mother's house to find out where we were. And Ray answered the phone. And he said, "Is this Ray?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "Who's this?" And I can't even remember what his name was.
Maynard?
No, they lived in Trenton, Missouri. Anyway, he come to find out he had a good job, real good job. And he wanted to hire Ray. He would be the accountant for this dealership. I can't remember what kind of dealership it was, but anyway, he would be the accountant for that dealership.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all well and good. Well, the woman keep coming to Ray wanting money. Her husband was out of town and she didn't have any money.
Mm.
And he said, Ray would say, I just can't give you money. And he said, I don't have it to loan you. And her husband was running around.
Mm.
And he was with another woman out of town and something. And of course, Ray knew that, and he couldn't say. But he knew he couldn't give her money.
That's a tough spot.
Yeah. So anyway, they finally divorced. They had a child,
Mm-hmm.
and they finally divorced. But anyway, let's see, where'd he go? Then he went to a jewelry store. And I had completely worn through my rings. And I was pregnant with Alan. And I didn't have any rings. And it just embarrassed the hell out of Ray. He did not like that
That
at
you
all.
didn't have rings.
And it didn't bother me. I knew I was married and I knew I was pregnant. So anyway, so Ray had to go to California right after Alan was born.
Oh, wow.
We moved there in June, that house in June. And then Alan was born June 10th. It was,
June 9th.
about 2 weeks later. And we moved into the house. And so anyway, then when right after we moved into the house, Ray had to go to California for 6 weeks. And
That's a long time for you
yeah,
to.
and this was a new job with the government, and he didn't have any choice, and he had to realize it. And Alan was brand new, and I wasn't feeling too good. But
So-
I had one to take care of that was 4 years old.
Mhm.
Yeah, she was 4 years.
In 4 months.
4 years and 4 months.
So was that when Ray started with the credit union administration?
Mhm.
Okay.
But he had to go to California because they were way behind on their audits, and they had to have help.
Yeah. What do you remember about those early days when, after Alan was born?
I remember I had to mow the lawn. I never mowed the lawn in my life. And I'd go out there and I couldn't get the damn lawnmower started.
Mhm.
Never. Didn't know how. Well, I kept trying out in the hot sun. And finally I just shut it down, went back in the house. I was through. I didn't care what. I said, I don't care if that grass gets as high as a house. I'm not mowing that lawn. And so anyway, Daddy came out and mowed it for me.
So you saw your parents a lot
Oh
when you
yeah,
were living there.
Mother
Yeah.
was out there almost every day,
Yeah. You had help.
and we'd go over there and spend the night, do anything.
Yeah. And then when did you leave Oklahoma City again? When was the what was the
That's
next
when
move?
we moved to New Orleans.
Okay.
We were transferred to New Orleans.
And I was in the middle of 4th grade, 1964.
Okay.
She knows more about those than I do. I'm no good at remembering years.
What did you think of New Orleans? Did you?
I did
you
not like New Orleans.
No.
And just like my neighbor had company from Michigan or somewhere up there, and they were going to go home the next day. And they said, we don't understand why you don't like it here. No one from out of town that moved there would like it.
Yeah.
And they said, we just don't know why you don't like it here. We love it here. She said, I'd love it too if I packed my suitcase in the morning and went home.
Mm-hmm.
So we all felt the same way.
How long were you there?
3.5 years, longest we were ever anywhere.
Wow.
I was there half of 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, and 7th grade. We moved the very end of 7th grade. So 1967, we moved to Tulsa, that beginning of that summer.
We were living in Tulsa for 2 weeks.
That's all?
Well,
we lived there at 6.
as Ray said, the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing.
They had bought a house, Daniel, and they had no more. Memom was getting it settled and didn't even have all the boxes unpacked before Papa got
None of the boxes were packed.
to Dallas.
And Ray was out of town. He was working doing an audit in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
And I called him and I said, "You got a letter here from Washington." And it says, he said, "Open it." I said, "I can't. It says for eyes only." What? And he said, "Open it." I said, "No, it doesn't. It says for you only." And it's very specific, Ray. He said, "Open the damn thing." I said, "Okay, I'll open it." He says, "What did it say?" I said, "It's be in Dallas by the commencement of this coming school year." This was on July. 1st of July.
Oh my gosh.
And then we got to Dallas and we found an apartment. And every morning I'd take the kids to school and I would get an apple and lay it in the seat of the car. And I'd drive. I'd worked with a real estate agent. She couldn't find a thing, not anything. I just drove the streets. I'd find an area where I liked, and I'd drive up and down the streets looking for signs for sale by owner.
Yeah.
And I finally found one. I'd just about given up, and I was going home, and I was on Webb Chapel.
Mm-hmm.
And I passed this sign on a fence. It says for sale by owner. Man, I turned that corner, and we bought that house. After Ray came home from work that night, and I said, "We got to go see a house." He said, "Nita, I'm tired." I said, "I don't give a damn how tired you are. We're going to see a house because I've got an appointment." And I said, "It's a house I want." He said, "Okay, let's go." So anyway, he and the guy went to the other room. They wouldn't even let the women hear what the big parts talked about anything. I thought it was more than what we could really afford because it was more than what we sold our house in Tulsa for the same amount as we bought it for. And I felt like this was more expensive, and I thought it was too expensive for us.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't. It wasn't. We made money on that house because the people, they were just a couple. And she had arthritis real bad all of her hands and everything. No children. And they were being transferred to Houston. So they just wanted out, and they made us a deal for what they paid for it. I don't know how long they'd been there.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved that house.
Was that your favorite of all the houses then, or?
No, the favorite of all the houses was on where y'all saw it.
Mesa.
Oh, on Mesa in Austin, yeah.
I like the one down the street better.
Yeah, there were two houses on Mesa.
They were both the same model, same floor plan, same builder.
Yeah.
But I like the other one better because it was a corner lot.
Yeah.
It was half block down the street. One of them was 7712 and one 7703.
I remember that. Yeah, yeah. Which was the one that they lived in when we were growing up?
7703.
7703.
They were in 7712 part of the time that I was at OU, and then they moved back to D.C. Or they moved to D.C.
Okay.
You're lucky. Linda's here to help.
I want to ask you to go back a little bit. I mean, you grew up in the Depression.
Yeah.
And
I never been hungry.
You never went hungry. Those were hard times.
Oh, yeah. They may not have been, we might have had a lot of beans and potatoes, but I was never hungry.
Yeah.
I didn't have any money.
Right.
And they didn't either.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, your daddy, I mean, he had to do the hard jobs that, to make do.
He was a mechanic, automobile mechanic.
Yeah.
Tell Daniel about how he went down to Packentown and asked for a job.
She did.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
We talked a little bit about that at the start with the blood cleanup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blood pit.
The blood pit. Ooh. And what do you remember about this? I mean, World War II, the food rations, and I mean the draft and everything like that. What was the world like for you then when that started?
It didn't bother me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. It didn't harm me in any way. But I can remember Daddy. They kept, like, he was in his 30s, and I don't remember how old he was when he started. But they'd say, everybody before that 32 or younger, they're eligible for the draft, and then move it up to 33. And Daddy said, "Oh goodness!" And then said everything by 33 is up for draft.
Yeah.
And then they'd move it up.
It was chasing him.
And he's scared that he's going to have to go to the Army. Well, he wasn't that he didn't mind going to the Army to help, but he had a wife and 3 kids at home.
Yeah.
And they were hungry.
Mm-hmm. Did you know? I mean, did you know any other families where the fathers were drafted? And
Oh yeah.
The mothers had to work and.
Mm-hmm. Mother didn't work. She worked at home.
Yeah.
She worked out at Tinker, didn't she?
Well, she did during the war, but we were back in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
When that.
Okay, she was at the Air Force Base.
When
Army.
We were in Shawnee when he took detached service, and so they were building Tinker Field, and they were hiring the mechanics, airplane, automobile mechanics. Daddy got on, but there was no place to work. They were building it.
Yeah.
And so he was sent to Clovis, and he was sent to a lot of places. He'd only stayed two to 3 weeks. Well, we hit San Antonio, and Daddy found out he was going to be there 3 months. So he wanted Mother and us to come down.
Yeah.
He found a 1-bedroom apartment. It was a duplex.
Yeah.
The sofa opened up into a bed, and Jeanne and I could sleep there. And then Billy I guess he had a cot.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they had a cot.
Yeah.
And we were all 3 sleeping in the living room. Mother and Daddy got the bedroom.
Yeah.
And Daddy got up early to go to work. And so they couldn't put us in the kitchen, and that's all we had.
And so you were in San Antonio for 3 months?
They were.
Okay.
But just as soon as school was out, they took me back to Granny's. And Jeanne wouldn't stay. The plan was Jeanne and I would both stay. But when we got there, Jeanne wouldn't stay because they were partial to me. And she didn't want to stay.
Because your grandparents, she said your grandparents...
It's just my grandmother by this time. My grandfather died in 1940.
Okay.
And he's the one that had the money.
Yeah. What was he like? You were really affectionate toward him.
I loved him to death, and I was his favorite. I don't remember it, but they tell the story about Mother's brother and his wife had a baby. They had 2 older children, but they had a baby. And Granddaddy was sitting in the kitchen by the window holding the baby. It was a new baby, pretty new. And so everybody was making over how cute it was. He was holding this baby and all this. And Mother and I came in the back door and came into the kitchen, and Granddaddy put her down, and he said, "Here's my baby."
Oh.
And I was probably 2 years old, toddling around or something.
Yeah. And was he a banker?
Mm-hmm.
Your grandfather?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the First National Bank is still there, but it's not running.
Yeah. And what brought that side of the family to commerce? Had they been in commerce for a long time?
Granny, they had a farm, and Granny had inherited 2 farms. Weren't very big, but anyway, they had a granddaddy and granny and granddaddy had a farm out there. What was that?
It was the fridge.
Oh,
It was just the fridge.
And anyway, granddaddy knew that he could win county commissioner if they moved to town. So they sold their farm and they moved to town in 2 tents and built that 7-bedroom house because they had 5 bedrooms upstairs and 2 downstairs for guests.
Yeah.
But they filled 2 in every room, except Irene got 1. She was the oldest. They wouldn't, because Mother and Edna slept together, they were closer to that same age.
Okay.
And Bob and Jake, Bob and Wheeler, and Jake and George, and Mother and Edna and Irene had those 4 rooms, and Granny and Granddaddy were over the kitchen. And that's what
Really?
they were.
Where they find
What was the family name on that side?
Ashworth.
Ashworth. That's right. Yeah. Are there still Ashworths in East Texas?
No,
Okay.
there's
No, I
and there's no heritage because there were none of the guys that the only one boy was
Little
ever
big town.
born, and there were 7 women,
I've seen him 3 times.
and the one boy, he never had children.
Yeah,
He
I've
adopted
been there.
children
It's
Okay.
an old audience for you.
and adopted 2. I don't know why they didn't have it, but anyway, he never had any children.
Yeah.
And his dad told me one time, he said, I always would rather made them myself.
And so, when did your grandmother die? So your grandfather died in 40.
Well, she came to live with Mother.
Okay.
She and Irene came to live with Mother.
That's right, Irene. Yeah. Yeah. And when was that? When they come there?
We lived on 70th. Linda,
Yeah.
what year did Granny and Irene come to live with Mother? We were living on 70th. I remember that.
I guess it was before we moved to New Orleans.
It was.
So it was before 1964. That's all I can tell you.
Okay.
So it was 63 or 64
Okay.
because we didn't live in the house very long. We had the house built, and we didn't live there very long until we were transferred to New Orleans.
Okay. And then, okay, so we were talking earlier about when you had gone to Tulsa. It was only for a couple of weeks, and then it was back to Dallas. You had
So we were there about 6 weeks.
And then
okay.
LBJ retired in Washington, and he wanted to take all of the every one of the government agencies out of Washington that were small, and take them to
Austin.
not too small, but he wanted to take them to Austin, and they
But
wouldn't go.
We
They
had
wouldn't.
moved from Tulsa to Dallas, and we've been in Dallas for about
He got
a
us.
year and a half
Okay.
when we got moved to Austin
Okay.
because of the whole regional office got moved.
Okay. And that was because LBJ just wanted stuff closer to him.
Yeah, and he got us. We were the smallest agency, so
Okay.
that's when he got.
And he was at the ranch.
Right.
then,
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
But Austin was the capital, of course, and
Yeah. I'm trying to remember if the credit union administration still has
yeah.
their branch office there.
oh yeah,
Still there?
I don't know if that's
they still
the
have them
regional
in
office.
Dallas and everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're all over the world.
Okay.
I mean, all over the United States.
And so then you all moved to Austin then. And then this one was on Mesa? That was the house on Mesa?
No, we lived on.
Greystone first.
It was Greystone. Okay.
We lived on Greystone, and I hated that house. I hated that house from the time we bought it. I didn't want to buy it. And Ray said, Nita, they're going up every day. That house has already gone up $1,000 since we looked at it. I said, but I still don't like it. And he said, they're going to go up $1,000 every day. He said, we can't even afford to build a house. How?
Yeah.
So anyway, and I was crying. And he said, sign it right there. I was crying. He said, sign it. So I signed it, and I hated that house. I despised that house from the day we moved in.
How did you two make decisions like that? You know, so he got transferred for work, and that there wasn't much of a choice there.
Yeah.
But, you know, how did you make decisions about where you wanted to live, what house to buy?
Ray usually figured it out, you know, because he'd talk to people that he worked and Northwest Hills was the preferred part of town.
Yeah. That must have been hard for you, because, I mean, he would know people where he was going.
And all I knew was neighbors after we got one of those houses. That he'd found out about the neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, it must have been hard to make friends. I mean, you're very social, but it must have been hard to make friends because you had to just keep doing it. You had
that was a whole thing. That's a whole life I led.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Nothing.
I was just basically saying, yeah, you were upset.
Yeah.
You were very upset.
Yeah.
But we were in an apartment, and Ray wanted out of that apartment because they were going up on our rent all. Remember?
Yeah. Right.
And they were going up on all the houses we were interested in. We weren't interested. There weren't many. We moved there right behind. What was that company?
Company.
There was one company that moved there right in front of us, and they bought everything that had
IBM.
IBM.
Oh yeah.
IBM moved there.
IBM still has a huge presence in Austin. Yeah.
Yeah, and
wow.
They moved right there before we moved in.
And so that's when a lot of those houses in Northwest Hills were first built. I mean, a lot of those were like mid to late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
Did you like Austin in general, even though you didn't like the Greystone house?
And the only reason we moved to Dallas because y'all lived there.
Yeah, it feels good.
Yeah, otherwise you wouldn't have had plans to leave.
No, I kept saying, you know, if anything happened to either one of us, because Ray was retired.
Yeah.
And I said, if anything happened to either one of us, the first thing the other one would do would be move to Dallas. And I said, I don't want to go up there. I want to go up there while we're young enough to get acquainted, because those kids are not going to entertain us, and I don't want them to. He said, I don't either.
When did you start playing cards?
Ray and I, the neighbors, we'd been married 2 years. And one of the neighbors come over and said, will y'all come over and play bridge with us? And I said, what's bridge? I'm still telling everybody what bridge is.
Yeah, yeah. You're a huge evangelist for bridge. And so you must have taken to that game pretty quick.
Actually, it was Ray's aunt and uncle. We were all family there, and two of the aunts wanted to play bridge. And Ray's sister and I, neither one knew anything about it. And so they said, we'll teach you.
Yeah.
And so they tried to teach us. Then she got a book, and I couldn't afford a book.
Yeah.
I didn't get a book. And somebody bought me a book. Well, I'm not a visual learner. I have to be taught.
Uh-huh.
And so I didn't pay attention to the book. And then I got to, I guess I got to Austin. Played a little bit. No, that was before we moved to Missouri.
Okay.
That was before we moved, and I got in with some people. They really taught me how to play bridge.
Okay.
And then we moved to Asst. Wherever we moved, I tried to get acquainted.
Get in with the bridge circle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then after Greystone, was that Chicago?
Yeah.
Yes.
And you know how my mother would drop hints? I'd come home from school and she would be singing Chicago, Chicago, da 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 da. And Alan and I would look at each other and we would go, oh no. And then they would say, kids, we want to talk to you. And Alan would go, where are we moving now?
Because Mom, you were at McCallum
Yeah.
then?
Yep. I was at McCallum High School.
Alan was in Murchison.
Yeah, yeah. And then so you go, Chicago must have been a big change.
Well, not particularly, because we always.
It was just another.
I didn't mind driving in Chicago.
Yeah.
I'd strike off downtown to shop.
Mm-hmm.
In the car.
What'd you think of it? Did you like Chicago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't like living there, but I like Chicago because it's a great place to shop.
It was a lot colder. How long were you in Chicago?
I don't think, not more than a year, and I'm not sure we were there. Although, I can't remember when we moved there. Where did we move there from? From down Austin. I can't remember how long we were there, but it wasn't too long. Because,
what, in Chicago?
Yeah.
We were there from the middle of my junior year in high school until Daddy's office got moved to Toledo, Ohio, and I left in the middle of my senior year and flew back to Oklahoma City, and you and Alan stayed for a little while. The house sold, and you came.
Well, I've got to tell the story behind all of that. How you wound up at Mama's.
So it sounds like everybody kind of scattered.
They did.
Yeah, we did.
The office was moved to Toledo, so Ray had to go. So it was up to me. He was moved along about Thanksgiving sometime. They wanted to get settled before the first of the year. And so when it's time to go, Ray had to go. It was up to me to sell the house. Well, houses don't sell in Chicago at Christmas time. And this was about Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So there was nothing like that. So I called this mover. I thought, we'll just go to an apartment and I'll move my furniture to Toledo. And I called this mover and I told him what I wanted. Okay, that's good. So then I found out that I couldn't rent an apartment for 6 months.
Okay.
And if you try to rent it for anything more, they will sue the hell out of you and get their money for that year. So I didn't want to get into that. And so I said, okay. First, I said, the kids and I, because Linda didn't want to leave. She was a senior in high school. And she didn't want to leave because she finally got acquainted there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the reason I wanted to go to an apartment and sell the house. And I had sold the house closing in February. And so anyway,
so Ray went to Toledo.
But he would come home every weekend.
Okay.
And he would go right past the south of Michigan Lake Michigan, and
Yeah.
it's snowing every damn time. But he came home and went back on Sunday night.
That's hard. And then you and Alan stayed.
And Linda,
Okay.
we were still in the house at this time.
Okay.
And so I was trying to figured out a way. How can I keep her here so she can go to school where she wants to go? And, and us go where we were supposed to go, to Toledo. So I finally said, Linda, would you consider going back to Oklahoma City and living with mom and papa,
Mama and Papa.
and or mom and papa or whatever, whoever they were then, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so anyway, she said, yeah, she would do that because she had friends from grade school and still kept them every time we'd go back to Oklahoma City. She
Yeah.
and Paula were friends,
Yeah.
for years. And so anyway, that was taken care of. I called Mother, and Mother said, oh, yeah, let her come on. Said, and Daddy let her have his station wagon to use.
Yeah.
And so she was settled. So then I was getting ready to move to Toledo. So I'd call the guys, take my furniture to Toledo, put it in storage. Okay. Then Ray calls me and he said, I just found out the 1st of April that I'm moving to Austin. I said, okay. So I called the guy back and I said, instead of putting our furniture in storage in Toledo, put it in Austin, Texas. He said, I'm going to have a deposit on this move. I can understand how he felt that way because I was feeling the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so anyway, I had to give up the house. I couldn't move Alan to Toledo.
Mm-hmm.
So I called Mother and I said, Mother, I've got another problem now. I said, I've got to get Alan out of here because I sold the house. Can we come back? She said, come on. Said, the house next door to me, Mr. Sanders, has been renting the house. And he said his renters moved out and it's vacant. And I'll bet you he'll be glad to have you because those last renters were horrible. I said, okay. But I still wanted the furniture to go to Austin.
Okay.
And Jeanne had moved home because Sonny had divorced her, and so she had all of her furniture moved back, and it was all in Mother's garage. So just the bare amount, got the refrigerator, and I think I don't remember the stove. I think they must have been a stove there, and the mattresses. Lyndon, I think, slept in one room, and then Alan slept in another, and there's 2 bedrooms. And anyway, we got in there. I got Alan in school, got Linda in school, or Mother got Linda in school.
Yeah.
And so we lived there till April. And that was February.
Oh my gosh. So then was Alan?
Alan was in the 8th grade, I guess.
8th grade? Okay.
Linda was in the 12th.
Yeah.
I graduated there.
Yeah, she graduated in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
And then we moved to Austin.
And then you started at OU. So did you go to Austin for the summer?
I was in Austin the summer before I started OU.
Okay.
And I reconnected with a high school friend down there. She was going to UT. And I left OU.
Okay.
Joe, have you listened to any of this?
All of it.
He's asleep.
I'm listening to all of
Have you ever heard anybody move as much as we did?
it. You do? I don't even think mine even hers.
So I tell everybody. Everybody says, how often did you move? And I said, every time the rent came due.
You're a fly-by-night family. I hope so. I mean, that's what I'd love to get, because I just, I know only. I feel like I only know maybe a tenth of these stories, and I want.
How old are you?
How old am I now? 37.
Well, you know about a third of it.
So we were talking about when you came back to Austin.
Well, let me explain why I was so definite on Pawpaw stopping and coming home drunk.
Yeah.
He has 3 brothers, and all 3 of them are alcoholics. One is a horrible alcoholic. The youngest one died at 48.
Yeah.
And then the middle one was an alcoholic, but I don't think he was as bad as the other 2.
Okay. And who had it the worst? Which of his
The
brothers?
oldest boy.
Is it
The oldest one.
JD?
JD.
Okay.
And Rex, of course, died at 48.
Rex died at 48.
Okay. Then what did you ask me before that?
Well, let's go there. So, I mean, like, what did you think of his brothers? What did you?
Well, when Ray kept coming home drunk, that's when I decided, every night I'd have a fight with him every night.
Yeah.
I don't want you coming home drunk.
Yeah.
I said, remember, you got a wife and a daughter at home. And he said, Nita, I'm not doing anything wrong. It's my boss. He said, he just insists on it. And I said, and I'm insisting on you coming home. And he said, I've got to keep this job.
Mm-hmm.
And so finally I just said, that's when Linda and I are going to, when we go home Christmas, Linda and I are going to stay, and I'd like to take the furniture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, I don't even like the job. I said, I don't like living here.
Yeah. Was Ray close with his brothers?
He was close with JD growing up, although he and Doyle fought.
I think Doyle was the only one of them I ever met. I think
Doyle became an alcoholic when he married. He divorced Glenna. He'd married 5 times.
Wow.
But he divorced Glenna, and then he married a girl that wanted to run a beer joint. And JD did the same thing. He didn't divorce, but he and Joe Gale had been divorced years. But he married a gal that, as Reppert always said, she never admitted they were drunk or they had a drinking problem or they had a beer joint or anything else. They had a cafe and a filling station. JD had a cafe and a filling station.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a beer joint and a filling station. And then Doyle married that girl that wanted the beer joint, so he withdrew his government retirement and gave it to her to fix it up.
Oh, no.
And they weren't married any time at all. And
Was that Doyle or was that JD?
that was Doyle. And then they were divorced. She divorced him because he ran out of money.
Yeah.
And then he'd been married twice before he married Glenna. And then he was married one more time. And I think Daddy and I both think she killed him because we think she hid his pills while he was at work.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because
She had already buried 2 other husbands.
This was her thing.
he had his pills on the table when she came home and found him laying on the bed. She had just fallen crosswise on the bed.
Yeah.
If the pills had been there, he would have taken them. But they weren't there. I think she came home and found him laying across the bed, and she put the pills out there.
And that was Doyle?
That was Doyle.
That was Doyle. So
that was his 5th wife.
Okay. maybe it was. So I have a memory of being on a boat when I was young with what I had thought was Doyle.
No,
But
it wasn't Doyle. It was a friend of ours
Okay.
there in Dallas. It was shit. He was Indian. Anyway, Ray went to college with him, and he hired him. And then when he was regional director in Austin, he found out that he wanted to come back to Austin. So Ray knew he was good, so he had him transferred back.
Okay.
And we were friends with him all the time. And he had this boat, and he just wanted us to get on that boat with him. So Daddy said, "Okay, no, we took you off."
Yeah, I that's what I remember. So then all of Papa's brothers, I think, died before I was born. Was that true, Mom? Papa's brothers, I think, had all died before I was born.
I was trying to think when Doyle was the last one to.
Well, you might have been little when Doyle died. Yeah, you were little.
Okay.
I can't remember.
You say that, but yeah, you're telling a lot of stories. There's a lot of memories here.
Well, I didn't want
Just
you
the
to catch
details.
me in a lie.
It's just the details. It's just the details. And so then, okay. Trying to remember when we were talking about you had come back to Austin. Ray was regional director then at that point? Or not yet?
No, he wasn't. Chicago. He was regional director when we came back from Chicago.
Okay. Okay.
And when he retired, he was right under the presidential appointment. He was as high as a government agency could put him.
Yeah.
He was an
Anywhere.
assistant administrator.
Yeah. Over the course of your life, that was a big change in kind of your means, right? Like,
Yeah.
your living situation was very different from what it was when you were growing up.
Oh yeah. I didn't realize it though.
y'all saved well, and you did very well for yourselves.
Uh-huh. But we did it all ourselves.
Yeah. A lot of this was on your back.
Uh-huh. Because Ray didn't trust himself with money. Ray's father could not save a dime. And he'd go out and buy a car knowing he didn't know how in the hell he was going to pay for it. And then they would come to repossess it. And Ray said many times he saw they would come to repossess the car, and he would watch them and listen. And then for some reason his dad would come out with $20 or something anyway. They were both school teachers.
Yeah.
And he'd give it to them. So just, delayed him.
I remember Papa talking about how they had his parents had
Hi, Tanner.
continued to work and do all right through the Depression, and that there would be other people who would come and they'd feed them, and they were all right during that
Well,
time.
they lived on the acreage, and they had cows and hogs and chickens,
Yeah.
eggs, milk.
Right.
We need the taxi at 5:20.
And he killed the chickens.
Yes, sir.
Papa. He hated
He
right?
wouldn't eat chickens.
Right.
He said he had to clean out the chicken house,
Yeah.
and that's what he thought.
And that was just the beginning of no
Well,
foul.
he never did like fish
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
his father would make him go fishing with him,
Yeah.
and then he would have to do all the work.
You'd have to clean them and gut them and all that kind of
Well, I
stuff.
don't know.
That's a hard
We'll be
upbringing.
right outside
It's hard.
in the
Yeah.
driveway there at the
He
ring.
had, And his father ruled
Thank
with
you
the
so much.
switch or board.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Whatever he could pick up is what he hit the boys with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, got our taxi.
And so then I think we're kind of close to the. Well, I guess Alan would have been in high school if we went back to that point. Was he coming into high school in Austin?
Came back to Austin, and we lived up the street. Linda was in college, so Linda was in Alan. Yeah,
Alan was.
he would have started the high school
Okay.
that semester.
Okay.
That was Linda's first year in college
Okay.
because she was giggling. Ha ha ha! I don't have to move.
She got to stay in one place for the first time in a long time.
And she didn't care where we were going. She didn't have to go.
Yeah, and so then DC, Rockville was after that then, because I think that's where Alan graduated
Yeah.
high school, right? Was it
Yeah.
Rockville?
And she came to DC to work, I think the
Right.
first year,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that got her that job. I was good at getting jobs for other people.
Yeah. How did you do that? How'd you connect that?
Well, Ray was a government employee, and somebody said, where'd she work?
Was that EPA?
Yeah,
Right.
I called EPA, and I told them who I was, and I said, my husband works for the National Credit Union Administration. And she has a daughter. He has a daughter that's coming home. I said, we have a daughter that's coming home from college for the summer.
Yeah.
And she needs a job desperately. They said, when she gets here, you have them call, or have her call her down, have them call us now.
Yeah.
We've got it.
Because I remember her telling us, when I lived in DC, I remember her saying that summer when she worked in DC, she and Pawpaw, she would ride with Pawpaw downtown, and they would park in a parking lot that was close to where I lived in my first apartment in DC. Of course, there was no parking lot there anymore. It was all buildings.
It's
but-
a high rise.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Not too high because they didn't allow it.
Exactly. It's, I think 12 floors max. What did you think of DC and Maryland? Did you like that area?
I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I never could get acquainted. I got acquainted with bridge groups.
Yeah.
I started a lot of bridge groups.
How'd you recruit people? How'd you find other
Well, I
players?
started with newcomers. I went to newcomers.
Okay.
And they wanted everybody to stand up that was new. And we did. Where were you from? What do you plan to do? And I just said wherever it was I was from. I don't remember. I'd have to think about it.
Yeah.
But I'd say, and I love to play bridge. And there was from them that said that they like to play bridge
Yeah.
too. So I got their names.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's fun. So that was just in the neighborhood then?
No, they were
Okay.
all over the area.
Yeah.
And the funny part of it is, I wouldn't play anything but duplicate, which is a harder bridge. And they weren't good enough to play duplicate, but I'd start these bridge groups, and you have to play duplicate.
Yeah.
And they'd want to play, well, will you teach us to play duplicate? Yes, I'll teach you. Well, I probably started 5 or 6 bridge groups. And some of them are still going.
Yeah. That's a legacy.
Well, some of the people changed. Listen,
Do you need to go?
I'm going to do something to my hair now.
Okay.
Damn dumb, she flunked kindergarten.
So what happened?
Well, as it started,
Yeah.
okay. Billy, Daddy's boy, was about a year older than I was, but he was very backward. He was slow,
Yeah.
and small stature and everything. But I played with him. He was a year older than I was, but I played with him because the two of us were the youngest. And he really liked me because I was the only one that played with him. So anyway, come time for him to go to kindergarten. So Mother took him up there and enrolled him. He beat her home. They just lived a couple of blocks.
Uh-huh.
So she took him back. He beat her home.
How did he get home? Just walking?
Walked, run. Yeah. And so Daddy stepped in. He said, Mother, if you'll go up there and get her to take Nita into kindergarten, Billy will stay. So Mother did. Took me up there. And she knew me because she always came with Mother when she'd bring Billy to school, kindergarten.
Yeah.
And so anyway, she said, yeah, she said, she's very mature for her age. But if I can let her into kindergarten, but I cannot send her to the first grade at 3. I was just 2 at that time. And so they said, well, okay. So they promoted Billy to the first grade. I stayed in kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
So I flunked kindergarten.
But it wasn't your own doing.
And I really didn't flunk. It's just too much that they couldn't send me on. So anyway, but that was the other story where I flunked was Daddy's way of telling it. So then next year I went to the first grade, thinking Billy would be in the second grade. Well, he flunked first grade. So he stayed in first grade with me. So then the following year, we both went to the second grade. The following year, I went to the third grade and he stayed in the second grade. And this time I was through messing with him.
Yeah. So what happened after that for Billy?
Well, the teachers would just send him on.
Okay.
They would send him on, but he never was in the same grade I was.
Yeah.
And Jeanne was 27 months older than I was, and she should be 3 years older because I was always a year younger than everybody. She was 1 grade ahead of me. I don't know what happened to her.
Okay.
But in her senior year, she didn't finish high school. Mother got correspondence course sent to the house,
Right.
and Mother finished her senior class.
Oh, how come?
To get Jeanne graduated with a
Okay.
degree from high school.
Yeah.
Mother did it.
She did the coursework for her.
Uh-huh. That was up and above board, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the story of my life.
And then Billy did Billy stay in Oklahoma City?
He lived with us. He quit school in the 10th grade. I think I was probably in senior then.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly. But Billy got to the age, where he thought he didn't have to mind Mother. He was a big boy, 14, 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so he told Daddy one time, Daddy and he were sitting out on the porch, and Mother could hear everything that was going on. And he said, Mother doesn't like me. And he said, she tries to run my life. And he said, it just doesn't work because Daddy, she makes me do things that I don't want to do. Mm-hmm. And Daddy said, Billy, I'll tell you one thing. She may not be the best for you, but I'll tell you one thing. She's one hell of a lot better than your own mother was. He said, she fed you nothing but Post Toasties. And he said, your mother always fed you food. And he said, and if she would try, he said, she treated you like she treated Jeanne and Nita. She made you mind. She made them mind. And So anyway, along for that, he kept saying he wasn't old enough to go to the Army. He said, if you'll give me the permission to go to the Army, I'll go to the Army. And he went to the Army.
So he enlisted.
Mm-hmm.
Did he fight in the war?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
And then where did he, because you said he lived in the apartments.
Yeah.
There
When he got
afterward.
married. He got married while he was in the Army.
Okay.
And then after they got married and he got out of service, then they moved in with Mother and Daddy.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons the apartments were built. And Jeanne, that's another reason. Me,
Yeah.
there's another reason.
And then how long did Billy live? When did?
Billy died when he was 50, lung cancer.
Okay.
He's a smoker.
Yeah. So that would have been what, around late 1960s?
He was a year older than I was.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
And then Jeanne died when she was 62. And it was basically lung cancer that sloughed off and went to her brain.
Oh, wow. When was the last time you saw her before she
Well,
died?
that's when she was 62.
Shortly before she died.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. How were your relationship with Jeanne when you were grown?
None.
Yeah.
No. We were casual to each other, spoke, talked. No love.
Yeah. And Irene, how did Irene come to live with Mama?
She came with Mama when Granny got to where she couldn't live alone. And that's basically what she was doing. Irene supposedly had a mind of a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
And she couldn't cook or anything else. And so anyway, Mother knew that she was going to have to be the one to take care of her or get her out of the house some way. And so she went down and talked to her and said, I want you to come live with me. And she said, no, I can't do it, Irene. Mother said, I meant Irene too. And because before Granddaddy died, he knew he was going to be sick and die. And he said, I don't know what's going to happen to Irene. He said, I have put my very best farm. He had farms all over Texas. And he said, I put my very best farm in her name, and it cannot be traded, sold, or taken from her in any way.
Mm-hmm.
So that because she didn't have sense enough, somebody come in and say, just sign this paper. Well, she'd sign it. I mean, she didn't know. And so anyway, then after Granny died, and Irene was still with Mother, and none of the other kids, first, they were going to take them 3 months at a time. Her and Wheeler, the superintendent of schools at Amarillo, and Edna, the one over Mount Vernon, and Mother. They were going to each take her 3 months at a time. Well, Jake and Edna and Mother. Well, Mother had 6 months, and then she gave her to Edna, and Edna took her and kept her 3 months. And then Jake and Irene took her, and they kept her 3 months, and they wouldn't take her again. Edna always had, school was out, and she had, her husband didn't work. School was out, but she had dental appointments. So she couldn't, hell, you could leave Irene by herself.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, it was Irene for the rest of Irene's life.
Yeah. And so your mom took in her mother and Irene.
Uh-huh.
And was that at the same time as who else was living in the apartments at that point? Was any family living in the apartments?
Renters.
Oh, just renters? Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Yeah. I don't think none of the kids were ever still living there. We weren't.
Yeah. What do you remember about your mother when you were young? What was Mama like when you were
She
a kid?
was strict, but not. She wasn't mean about it. She just told you what to do, and you better do it.
And how about as you got older, as you were grown, as you got married, kind of what was your relationship like with your mother then?
It was good.
Yeah.
It was good. She was crazy about Ray.
Yeah.
And Daddy liked him too in the later years when he got to know Ray. He liked Ray, really liked Ray.
So did it just take some warming up time because Ray was just a little more
Because
shy?
Ray didn't talk. My daddy didn't talk. They didn't get to know each other for a long time.
Maybe they could have gotten to know each other a little faster. Maybe it wouldn't have taken decades then.
They had something to say.
What were I want to talk about Linda and Alan. What were they like when they were kids?
Linda was always picking on Alan. Always.
That was
They're
perfect timing.
4 years and 4 months difference in their age. And Linda, her job was to rinse the dishes and get them in the dishwasher. Alan's job was to take them out of the, if they were dishes first, he's supposed to take them out of the dish. No.
He had to clear the table.
He had to clear the table and sweep the floor. And I can't remember. Linda's would just to put the dishes in the dishwasher, I guess. I don't remember. That's been too long ago. You know how old I am.
But she picked on him a lot?
Yes. Yes. I didn't say anything to her because I thought that was probably normal. But she was just teasing him, but it was picking.
Let me know when you let the other side.
Huh?
The other side.
She said, let me know when you want the other side of the story.
She didn't have another side.
How were each of them in school? How did they do in school?
Alan was slow getting started because he memorized. And the teacher would tell him to read, and he'd read the whole book. But he didn't know a word this was in there. First grade, he flunked reading. But then he got it together. And then he did great.
Yeah.
But Linda was always okay.
Someone mentioned the other day a story about when Alan didn't want to go to college. And I think he had said that.
He was going to go. Oh, he wanted to go to college. He wanted to go to OU because Kenny lived there. Kenny lived in Norman.
And he and Kenny were really tight.
Yeah. They were the only two. Well, they had other male cousins, but they wouldn't have anything to do with anyone else. But there's 2 years difference in the two of them. But they were just like that.
And that's what made him want to go to OU.
Yeah.
Because Kenny was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that time, OU had a real football team.
Oh, yeah.
And that would help.
And then what was it like then when he left the house? Linda had left the house. It's you and Ray. Papa was still working for a time after that?
Yeah, Papa worked. I worked down there with Papa, Mother came down and took Daddy's lunch to him. And when she got home, Papa called her and he said, "Is Nita or Jeanne, either one there?" And she said, "Nita's here." I had quit a job with a telephone company. If I didn't like it, I'd quit. And so I quit the telephone company. And when I came home and said I'd quit my job, Mother said, well, why did you quit? And I said, I'd already bought all my Christmas presents and I already had some money saved and I didn't need it.
You achieved your goal.
And what did you ask me?
Well, I was asking about what was it like when Linda and Alan left, and it's you and Ray again, and the kids are out of the house. What was that like?
Well, Alan, I was never alone. Jeanne was back. See, Jeanne got married in December and divorced in February. She was only married 3 times. That was her first one. And she married Jan's daddy. And then he found somebody else. And, some way or the other, she didn't manage to get too close to her husband.
That was a hard side of the family. Jean's side with Jan and then Kevin.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's some hard times on that side of the family.
Yeah. I just kind of stayed away from it. When I'd go, I'd just visit with Mother. And I couldn't stand Jan. She had a personality that it was Sonny's fault. From the time she was a tiny baby, he would tickle her and wouldn't let her stop laughing. And just keep on. And I think that's what caused her to be like she is.
Mm.
And that was all of her life.
Yeah.
All of her life, as long as Sonny was around.
And what was Jan like?
God, you'd have to ask Linda. She's horrible. She teased Alan constantly. And of course, Alan was the baby. I think she was 2 years older than Linda.
And Linda really looked up to her.
At early age.
Yeah.
Because she was the older girl. The older one. Period. There's just 3 grandkids.
Right.
At one point. Well, that's all there was. 3 grandkids. Jan and then Linda and Alan.
Yeah. And we were talking yesterday about when you all went back to Austin.
Which time?
Well, I guess the time then when. Well, that's a good question. We were talking about when
After we moved from
you
Chicago.
had gone to DC. We talked about DC yesterday, and then after DC, you would come back to Austin, right?
Yeah, because they had a new presidential appointment. And the one going out and the one coming in could not stand each other. They would even talk to reporters about the other one. And they got into it in the papers. And so anyway, when they got the jobs changed, Ray was the old one's assistant, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And when the new one came in, he told Ray, he said, Ray, I like you, and I have nothing against you. But he said, I would like to have my own man in here, this position. Ray said, I understand that. He said, well, I don't want to hurt you. I'll put you anywhere you want to go. He said, I want to go back to Austin as regional director. That was his favorite job. So anyway, he said, okay. So we put him back there. 2 years later, he changed his mind. He wanted him back in Washington. And that's when Ray called me and said, well, you want to go back to Washington? I said, I'll do whatever you say. I always have. Just tell me what and when. And he said, that's not what I asked you. I said, do you want to go back to Washington? I said, well, if that's where you're going, yeah, I want to go. And he said, Nita, listen to me. I'm saying, do you want to go back to Washington? I said, no. And he said, that's all I wanted to hear because I'd already figured out a way I could retire.
And so that's when he retired.
Uh-huh. It was, they ever send this, that's what they do when you get up so high in Washington. They send your checks where you're going. And then they come back and tell you where you're going. And if you don't go, you're not getting a check. So that's the way they outsmart you.
Not this time.
Not this time. We got the better deal. And we stayed in Austin in 17 years.
Right. You were there for a long time. And then what was that, after he retired, what was life like then?
Well, we would take a spell. You know how they have those cheap theaters that change movies every week? We would make a habit of this one theater. We would show good go no matter what it was, how bad it was, how good it was, or anything else. We'd go see that movie every week.
Yeah.
That was one thing we look forward to. It was just, and it's something to do.
Yeah.
And then we played bridge. And so I don't know what else.
You all of a sudden had a lot of time together.
A lot of time, lots and lots of time.
Did you enjoy that? Was
Yes.
it different? You enjoyed it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because really, our married life, we didn't have much time together
Mm-hmm.
because he was traveling all the time, home on weekends, then back again, going out of town again. And then when he was in town, he'd come home and he'd sit in front of the television. You know that.
I remember that well.
And that was not pleasant for me, but I got used to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd say, I'm going to the grocery store. Okay.
Did he start to do some other work after he retired?
Yeah.
Or something? I'm remembering something.
Buford, his first boss with the government, he was crazy about Ray, and Ray was crazy about it. He had retired from the government. That's the reason that Ray was taking his job as a regional director all the time. And anyway, he had gone to work for the state with the same thing, but they oversaw the state credit unions. And he wanted Ray to work for him, so it was a piddling job, but he got paid, but he never got rich. I really resented that because I thought that's the time. And then after Buford retired, Ray quit. Then he didn't have anything. And that's when the credit unions and the agency were calling him to do jobs for them, contract jobs. And they were paying him good money. And it kept getting, because Ray'd say, I don't think I want to do it. And they'd offer him a little more money, so he'd take it. And he got to where he was making more than he ever thought he'd ever make in his life. That's when we started bundling up the money. And
So it was that after he retired and he was doing that contract work.
And even after we moved to Plano, they called him, and they were offering him, something like $60 an hour, and that was, I think, 40 or 50 an hour was the most he had ever made, and that was more than he'd ever made in his life or could make anywhere else.
I didn't realize he worked some after y'all moved to Plano.
No.
Oh, no.
We got to got to Plano, and that's when they were calling him and offering him $60 an hour. And he had done one job. We were living in Austin, and he had done a couple of jobs in Dallas, and he was making probably $40 an hour. And so what we were doing, we were going for dinner every night at a different restaurant in Addison. It would just find anything, And I had y'all over there to that apartment one time where we lived. It had 2 bedrooms, and we put you and Tim in 1 bedroom and together. And do you remember that?
I'm trying to remember.
And do you remember going fishing?
I don't.
We didn't have a rod or reel or a hook or line or nothing else. In a little creek down there, about a little wide as from here to you. And I took you down there and said, we'll go fishing. I don't know what I told you, but I made you believe it.
I want to go back a little bit to when you were in Austin. I'm remembering
3 times.
3 times, yeah. And I'm remembering a connection with who was the LBJ staffer who also
Tom Johnson.
Tom Johnson, right? How did that connection happen?
When we moved to Austin the first time from Dallas, when the agency was moved to Austin, we lived across the street, cat a corner across the street from Tom and Edwina. And they had been using the little girl that was about Linda's age next door to us as a babysitter. That's the only one they had. And apparently they didn't like her because I was in the yard one day and I walked around to the back, but I didn't see her coming, but I walked around the back until she came around the back where I was, and she said, I'm Edwina Johnson. I live across the street. And she said, don't you have a daughter that babysits? And I said, well, she never has, but I guess she could if she wanted to. And she said, well, if you don't mind, she said, I would like to try her. And I said, okay. They grabbed Linda and held on to her, you know how long, all of her life, and let that other girl go, and they never hired that other girl again. So you know they were happy with Linda.
Yeah. I mean, that went a long ways.
Even when we moved to Chicago, Edwina come over there one day and she said, Nita, we don't want to use Linda as a slave or a cleaning lady or anything else. We would like for her, when she gets ready, finishes high school, to come live with us and go to UT. And I said, Edwina, I can't do that. Could you let one of your kids give her to somebody?
That's a bold request.
I knew they would be good to her.
Sure.
But she would not be my daughter anymore.
That's a bold request.
Yeah.
They were really taken with her.
And both of the kids were still young. Yeah. I'm sure they used her for a babysitter. And that's what she said. She said, we'll use her as a babysitter and we'll pay her if she doesn't have other plans.
I'm also remembering a connection that you had with Bob Bullock.
Uh-huh.
Tell me about that.
Well, his wife, what's her name? Bullock. She was a real estate agent. And she sold our house on Greystone when we moved to Chicago. And anyway, when we moved back, I went to her to get an agent to show me around. And I'm trying to think what her name was. Bob Bullock and Amelia Bullock. Amelia was the head of that. And she told me, I'm opening an office. And I said, well, you need to hire me. I've never worked, but you need to hire me. She said, okay, I'll hire you. Will you sit at the front desk and be our receptionist and answer the phone for me and do what's necessary? I said, sure. But she's going to pay me. Then Linda was coming home for the summer, another job. And I said, Edwina, I don't mean Edwina, Amelia, my daughter's coming home from college this summer, and she needs a job. And when I said I wanted to work, I didn't stop thinking about what I was going to do in the summertime. And I really don't want to work in the summertime. I said, would you hire Linda for the summer? And then I'll come back in the fall. She said, okay. Well, she told me at the time that she was opening the office, she says, and Bob's going to have an office there. They'd been married, I don't know, it was just their second marriage or their third marriage. But anyway, they were getting married again. She said, we're getting married again, and he's going to have an office. And it was a front office where everybody else was crowded in the big office, and Amelia had her private office.
Yeah.
But all the agents were just scattered in there.
Was he he wasn't the lieutenant governor yet at that point?
No, but he was,
in the
at
legislature?
that time he wasn't.
Okay.
But I mean, he was good as gold, or he could just be cranky as hell. And so I tried to ignore it completely because I knew he ruled it. But he didn't have anything to do with the real estate end.
Yeah.
But anyway, then Linda had to go back to school, and I was going to where was I going from there? That wasn't Chicago.
Was it DC? Was that when you left and went to?
Yeah, that must have been DC.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that was all of Amelia and Bob.
Yeah.
And so then here come Alan. He was in school at OU. And he came home for the summer. So I knew he was coming home. And I called Bob. He was controller, Texas controller at that time. And I called Bob. And I said, Bob, this is Nita Motzenbacher, and I need a favor. He said, you got it. What is it? And I said, I have a son coming home from college for the summer, and I need him a job. He said he had a secretary, and I knew who she was. I'd met her when he was in that other job in all real estate. And anyway, he said, call her, and I can't remember her name, and tell her who you are, and tell her I said to give him a job. So that's exactly what I told her. I said, I'm Nita Motzenbacher, because she recognized the name too. And she said, I said, I just talked to Bob, and he said, told me to call you and tell you I have this son coming home from college, from Oklahoma University, this summer, and he needs a job for the summer and for you to put him on. She said, okay, I'll do it. He put him on in the controller's office. And Alan had dated a girl that was working in there. And they started comparing notes. She was an A+ student in high school, and she was doing good in college. They started comparing paychecks and everything. Alan was making more than she was.
Oh, how unfair. How unfair is that?
Well, she didn't know who I knew. So then he worked there, and he came back again. I called him the next year, and I said, this is Nita Motzenbacher. And I said, I have another favor. He said, you got it. What is it? So anyway, I said, my son is moving to Dallas, and he needs a job. He said, what part of town's he moving to? So I told him northeast. And that's what it was. And he said, here's what you do. You have him to call this guy in that department over there in northeast Dallas, and he will hire him. And he did. And that's what he and Ann, because Alan wanted to get married. Alan couldn't stand Shirley, Ann's mother, because she did not like him, and she made no moans about it. Because Alan had kidney disease, and she kept telling Ann, if you marry him, you're going to have to make a living the whole life because he's going to be sick. And she said, I plan to work the rest of my life anyway, and so I'll do it. And so anyway, Alan said, okay, you come on and move to Austin. She said, I can't do what I want to do in Austin. She said, I can do it here in Houston.
Oh, in Houston, yeah.
And Alan said, I won't go to Houston, not with your mother. And so she knew what their situation was between Alan and her mother. So anyway, he said, can you do it in Dallas? She said, I can do it in Dallas. He said, let's go to Dallas. So they got married and they moved to Dallas. Or they moved to Dallas and then they got married. And so anyway, it worked.
That's a compromise.
Yeah. It's been over 30-something years.
Yeah. You are quite the connector.
Not really. Not because of jobs. That job as a secretary, I mean, receptionist was the only job I ever had in my life.
Well, but I think of your, like, you organize bridge groups.
Oh, yeah.
You know, community kind of things, neighborhood kinds of things. You manage to hook people up with jobs. You've got a knack for that.
You know what Ann always said about her?
Well,
Ann said if she had been born, 50 years sooner, she'd have been the CEO of a major corporation.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it.
I've had the education.
You've clearly always had the ability.
Well, when Alan graduated from college, and at the same time we moved to Austin, D.C., and Ray said, you always wished you had got to go to college. And I said, and he said, so I want you to go to college now. We're right here in Austin, and you can go to college. I said, I wanted to go to college with the 16-year-olds. I didn't want to be 60 when I'm in there with the 16-year-old. And he said, well, you can do it. And I said, I won't do it. I won't even try to do it. I said, I'm not going to have that strain. And he just kept on asking me, and finally I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll get my real estate license. He said, okay. So I got my real estate license.
I didn't know that.
I didn't want it. I played bridge. So one of the girls was moving somewhere, and she said, Nita, will you list my house? And I said, I certainly will. So I listed her house, and it sold right away, and I got the commission. And then another girl said, I've got to have my house sold. Why don't you list mine? And I said, okay, I'll list it.
Yeah.
And it sold. And then somebody was going to move somewhere, and I got a referral fee. And and I said, oh, Ray's replacement there in Austin as regional director wanted the house. And Ray told him my wife's a real estate agent. So he took me, let me sell him, and I sold that house. And then we moved to Plano. And I still had my real estate license. So the one I was working for, Amelia, said, if you get somebody, if you go to work up there, or even if you don't, if you sell something, she said, give us a referral fee. So I did that. And
Okay, so we have an A and it starts with A.
I think that's about the last thing I did.
D is
So then, about a year later, when the bottom dropped out of the market, and I got my license and I had to renew it, and I think it was $35 or something like that. I said, I'm not going to do anything with that real estate license anymore. I'm just going to, I got some money for Linda and Bill one time, I think, with a house. And so anyway, I let my real estate license go rather than renew the license. So that was my real estate license.
It's a lot of hats you've worn.
Huh?
It's a lot of hats you've worn. You've worn a lot of hats.
Yeah.
Done a lot of different things.
Mostly getting jobs for other people, not me.
That's a
I
high
didn't
paid
want to
thing.
work. I didn't want to work.
Well, it's funny. I mean, like what you were talking about going to college. It's like that has changed. I mean, in colleges these days, you see a lot of people that are not coming straight out. They're not 18 years old. You know, they're coming mid-career.
But they weren't 60.
There's a lot of people. I had college classes even. With
Yeah,
people
well,
that
I
were
knew
retired.
some. There was some. There's one girl I played bridge with, and she lives at Tradition now. But we were in bridge club with her and her husband. And she got a real estate. She got a law degree on the computer.
If there
Yeah.
are
That's how
two
she got
same
it.
letters,
Yeah.
does that show up somewhere else too?
That's the first thing I asked her when we got out of the bridge group. She was still working on it, and they moved into Tradition. First thing I asked her, I said, "Did you ever get your law degree?" She said, "Yes, I did." I said, "Good." I said, "I've always wondered about that." There'd be tears in the house. You didn't know whether it's coming from one person or two, but there's going to be tears in there.
Oh, that's hard.
Let's see what part.
Yeah, I listen to that crying 24 hours a day. No, she did not 24 hours. She slept. But every time she was awake, she was crying.
And that lasted for how many weeks?
Huh?
How many weeks did that last?
6 weeks.
6 weeks. Oof.
By that time, you used to think if somebody would come by here and say how good they'll be to her, I'd let her have them. Let them have her.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, you wouldn't, but you just dream about things, anything to get rid of that.
Right. Oh, that's so hard.
So what else?
Let's think. Well, after Ray was retired, we're living in Austin, and you became grandparents
Mm-hmm.
when Tim was born.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that. What do you remember about that? I guess from when Linda and Bill got married and Tim was born a while after. What was that?
Now, see, I never had. I'd go to the house and I'd take care of Tim while we were there. If I woke him up, I'd get him back to sleep. So Linda, she just hated it when I'd wake him up. I hadn't seen him for weeks on end, and I just dying to see him. And I'd go in there, and I wouldn't try to wake him, but I would accidentally wake him. And she'd get mad, and she'd run to the other part of the house, and I'd always get him back to sleep. But anyway, when he was small, we didn't take him home
Like use
with
some
us
ugly
then
letters.
till he was about, I guess,
Okay.
2 or 3, and we'd take him, keep him a week.
What was it like being a grandparent for the
It
first
was
time?
wonderful.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful when you came along too.
I'm glad to hear that.
But I was afraid of you because you were always sick. Every time I'd try to take you anywhere, you'd come down sick. And it scared me to death because I didn't know how to treat you.
Yeah.
And anyway, when y'all got old enough to fight, Ray and I were just playing referee, and it was mostly me playing referee the whole time y'all were there. And I told Linda when we took y'all home the last time that we took them both at one time, I said, I will still babysit with both of the kids, but I'll only take them one at a time. I said, I'm tired of playing referee. And I said, if I bring one, when I bring him back, I'll take the other one and I'll show him a good time, but not two at a time. And I never would take him both at the same time again. I mean, that was worse than that crying all the time, because one of you were always, it's usually you crying. And I just didn't want that.
I feel like I'm getting a taste of my own medicine with my own kids.
Playing referee.
Oh, all the time. All the time. It's hard. And then tell me about moving up to Plano.
Well, we were in Austin, in the house there where y'all knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Ray one day, I said, you know, if anything in the world happened to either one of us, the first thing the other one would do is move to Dallas so that it should be we'd be by the kids. And I said, I think we should move while we're young enough to get acquainted, because those kids are not going to entertain us, and I don't want them to have to.
Scowl.
And he said, well, I don't either. So that's when we decided to move.
I remember being on the phone with you when you were in Austin. You had called
A lot.
the house, and that was when you told me that you were moving up there. I remember that.
And the house was for sale next door, and you said, oh, maybe me and Papa will buy that house next door. Linda said, I don't think me, Mom, and Papa want the house next door. Can you imagine living next door to your in-laws? No matter how much you love them or anything else.
Yeah, I do very much. But I think that would be, everybody wants a little space, I think. Yeah. That makes sense.
Some alone time.
Yeah.
You saw the texts going on?
Yeah.
Mother, Tim and Carrie woke up with sore throats and sinus stuff. So they're making a drive to go find COVID tests. They don't want to come over here. They were going to come at noon, but they don't want to come over here until they can get a quick COVID test and find out what's going on.
Well, if they go to the right place, the right kind of test, it'll take 3 minutes. They go in there and the swabs, it seems like he's sitting in there with that swab stick for an hour, but they're not. They just keep going around and around, and then the other round and round. And he puts it on something, a little deal.
Yeah.
And then closes it up.
Right.
3 minutes.
Those little rapid tests. Yeah, I think that's what they're looking for right now. I brought 2 with me. I'm going to plan to take one tomorrow morning, I think, before I leave. Of course, if it ends up positive, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that changes.
You can't go home.
I think it means I can't go home. That's why I brought my work computer.
Where's this plane taking me?
Exactly.
Will I ever see my kids again?
Yeah. So hopefully it's nothing for them.
And if Joe said he told him his money's more on the low humidity.
Rice scratch, you throw out rice scratch, I'm pretty sure it's because there's no humidity in the air.
Yeah.
Run our heaters.
I don't know what you said.
Okay.
He thinks it's just the dry air. The dry air is probably what's behind it for them. Yeah.
Because people who live on the coast have pretty high humidity usually.
Yeah. So, Memom, you were talking about the move up to Plano. How did you decide on that house on Snidow?
Well, because we had a choice. We looked all over Dallas, anywhere in the north part of town, east or west, and we couldn't find anything, nothing. And we looked for real estate agents, on our own, like I found that one in Dallas before, and driving up and down the streets in an area that I had found that I liked. And anyway, then we had to go out somewhere else, so we went to Plano. And there's two houses. I mean, two houses, period. We did not want a swimming pool. We did not want a cracked slab that had been repaired. So there were two houses, that one and by the same builder down the street. And it was at the time when housing, everything went bankrupt, housing and everything else. So these were both built by the same builder. And I did not like the one down at the bottom of the street. So that just left no choice. That is either that house or none. And the builder went bankrupt. There's a reason it was on the market. The bank went bankrupt. Savings and Loan went bankrupt. And some other company went bankrupt, and so the government agency had it. I don't remember what it was. Anyway, we were able to pay cash for the car, for the house, which we were planning to do.
Yeah.
And it was the end of the year. Well, this government agency wanted them off the books before the first of the year. So we set up closing. We were happy with the price, so we were just going to go sign up and get our house. We got up. All of a sudden, the price was up because of this you never heard, never even imagined things that they came up with. The reason they had to put more on the price on the house. Ray said, "Come on, let's go." He said, "That's not what we came in here for." So we got up and left. So just about a week or two later, they called us.
Yeah.
Come on back to closing. Okay, we went back to closing. Got there, it'd gone up again from what we agreed on. It wasn't as high as it was before, but it was still higher than what we. Ray said, "This is not what I promised." So what I said I'd pay. Nita, come on.
Mm-hmm.
We walked out there 3 times. And finally, it's getting closer to the first year all the time. And we were the only one that was interested in the house. Yes. So anyway, and we were paying cash and didn't get it off the books.
Mm-hmm.
And they liked us. And the third time they said, "Come on back. We will close at your price." And they did. So.
You know, one of the things that really sticks out for me is the Mediterranean cruise that we did for your 50th wedding anniversary in 1998. That's a really fond memory.
Well, Alan, Ann, and y'all, and none of you had ever been on a cruise. We had been on a cruise.
Yeah.
But nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had been on probably a land tour that came by probably the Mediterranean, but not, like a cruise. And Alan was scared to death that David would fall off the ship, and we'd never see him again, So I said, "Alan, he's not going to fall off the ship." "How do you know he's not going to fall off the ship? You don't know David. He's curious." And I said, "He can't fall off the ship." And of course, he and Brian both loved it because as soon as they got through eating, they went to their party, and there was somebody in there that was teaching them or playing with all the kids that came in. And the next time we went on the cruise in the Caribbean, Brian was too old, and I think it was just the next year.
Mm-hmm.
We still gave you kids the Christmas, but we told all the adults you have to forego your Christmas for 2 years. So they did, and then we took that. And Brian was too old. He didn't want to go to any parties. He just wanted to hang around with the adults. He was too young for them and too old for everybody else.
And that was Brian, or was that Tim?
That was Brian.
That was Brian.
When we went on that second one.
Yeah. What were your grandkids like when they were young? What
were my grandkids like?
Yeah, like
you were one of them.
I know, but I'm asking the question because just what What do you remember about each of us when we were young? What were we like? You know, I know I was the one who was always climbing into your lap to get a back scratching, you know, things like that. But like, what were those kinds of things? What was the personality of each one of your grandkids?
Well, I can remember when Tim was at our house one time when he was about 2 years old. And he loved coming to our house for a while. But he'd love to go home as soon as he could. He never begged to go home. But I'd always make chocolate cake with chalk icing in a loaf pan. And I'd always set it on the cabinet right by the refrigerator, just right there. Because it was out of the way.
Yeah.
For no other special reason. Well, I was in the kitchen one day, and Tim and Ray were in the living room then. And I looked at that cake, and right at the edge of it, he was just 2. And right at the edge, there were fingerprints. And I said, Paw, we've got a problem. It's a real problem. He said, what's the matter? I said, we have a chocolate mouse in here. And Tim heard me and he went,
He was sneaky.
He's sneaky. But he could barely get any chocolate out of that cake anyway.
I remember that. Of course, I remember the chocolate cake and the chocolate icing. That's an icon for me. But I also remember how you would make it and you'd leave it there on the stove to cool. And I just remember the smell of it. That stuck out.
I remember one time in school, the teacher asked you what your favorite food was, and you said my grandmother's chocolate cake.
You bet. So I got that recipe from Mom years ago when I started cooking, and
you use a cake mix.
Yeah, and I just use a cake mix. Yeah, and then made
Duncan Hines.
Yeah,
I always use Duncan
Hines. Okay, that's good to know. And I would make that icing. I would make that chocolate icing. That's so good. It's so good. And for the longest time, especially because Mom's recipe was handwritten on a note card. Or no, actually, she didn't have anything written. It was just by memory. And then I wrote it on a note card. For the longest time, I thought this was just a family creation. And then a few years ago, I turned the Hershey's cocoa can around and I saw it was about 95% the same. It was a little bit off, just a little bit off. And I was like, what? So is that how you started making that?
I don't remember.
It was a long time
We
ago.
made the most of it.
Yeah, ours was always a lot better.
But you know what Alan does with that recipe? He uses double recipe for chocolate icing to put on a cake, and a sheath cake, if he ever does it. But he also just makes 2 or 3 recipes of the chocolate icing, and he spreads it out in a pan and cuts it up, and it's fudge.
Yeah. It is, yeah. It's like that. It's really good. So what was I like when I was little? What do you remember about?
You just wanted to be loved, and I mean to tell you, I gave you all the loving you wanted. You'd come running in my lap, and I'd always fix it for you.
You always gave the best back scratches.
I don't remember the back scratching, but I remember the loving.
Yeah. And I always had the green car, blue car.
Yeah.
Thing.
Yeah, whoever in the room with you at the time, that's the color it was. If I was in the kitchen and you were in there in the den, it was always a blue car. And no, it was a green car. And if you were in the kitchen, it was a blue car.
Yeah.
And it depended. That car changed colors a lot.
Just based on whoever I wanted to get along with in the movie.
Yeah. And whoever was in the room with you, that's the one you wanted to get along with.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. What was Brian like when he came along?
I didn't see Brian much when they were little. Didn't see either one of their kids when they were little. Ann didn't get to see him much. And when she got home from work, she was all mother. So she didn't want to leave them, let her kids go.
Yeah.
And I understand it. I didn't like it, but
And then David, do you have any particular memories of David when he was little?
he was born after we got in Dallas.
I think he was 94.
Yeah, we moved to Dallas in 92.
Yeah.
But it's late 92. It's been too long. My memory, I can't even remember words or names or anything else, and you want me to remember what you acted like?
That's right. That's what I'm asking. What are the I'm kind of struggling for the words. What are some things that you've learned in your life that really stand out? Like, you have a lot of wisdom. What do you want younger people to know? What do you want your great grandkids to know? What do you hope that they learn and remember through their life that you've learned?
I don't remember much. I really don't.
But you have a lot of lessons, right?
But Daniel,
I'm not talking about school stuff. I'm talking about life stuff.
Yeah. I really don't remember anything. I can't carry on an intelligent conversation.
What do you wish for them?
Oh, I want them to have the very best of everything. I want them to be smart. I want them to be good looking, and I want them to have money. Now, what else is there I can wish for? But I want every one of them to be like that.
Yeah.
Someone asked me, said, which one of your grandkids, you talk a lot about your grandkids, but which one is your favorite? I said, the one that has made over me the most in the recent minutes, or the one that acts like they love me the most. I said, in that moment, they're my favorite. But if they do something, they get knocked out of the place.
I want to ask you about something, and if you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. The end of Papa's life.
Huh?
The end of Papa's life.
It's his life.
Yeah.
Well, the end of his life got to where it was nothing to me because he had been sick so long. He had Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And he had been sick so long. And, you didn't want to have anything to do with him. He didn't understand. And if you tried to explain something to him, it would confuse him and he wouldn't be happy with you. And so there was nothing. So really, I didn't think about it. I mean, I was sorry when he passed, because he passed in the middle of the night in Mama and Papa's house. She was the only two in the house, but she was in another bedroom. She didn't even sleep in the same bedroom with him because he, like I said, he was Alzheimer's and he didn't know anything.
Oh, I meant Ray.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. I didn't mind Ray's illness at all. I mean, I'd rather he had been straight, just normal like he always was. But I didn't mind it. I took care of him and I loved it because I knew he couldn't get any better, but he needed help. And I did everything I could do for him. Well, I couldn't shower him because I couldn't get him back to the bed. I couldn't get him up. I couldn't get him back in bed. I couldn't get him to do anything. So what I did, anything I'd tell him to do, he would do it. So he got to where he didn't want to take a shower. And I thought, oh, that's not going to work. So I said, okay. I said, you don't want to take a shower. I said, do you remember one time we were going to go and take your mother somewhere and you called Janice, his sister, and said, be sure Mama showers? He said, I don't remember. And I said, well, you did it. You said it. And I said, you're getting that way. And I said, it won't work. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, I'm not going to ask you to take a shower every day. I know that'd be too much for you. But I am going to ask you to take it twice a week, every Tuesday and every Friday. And we'd go to bed, and I'd look over, and time we were getting up, and I'd say, Tuesday morning shower day. He'd throw that cover back, get up, go in there, call the shower, take his shower. He did it all by himself, and came back. That's it. And he'd get to where he wanted to be with me all the time. And because he couldn't remember anything and he couldn't go any place, couldn't anything. So anyway, he wanted to be with me anywhere I was. He wanted to be with me. If I was in the house, he wanted to be in the house. If I walked outside, he wanted to be outside. So one day, I said, I'm going to the grocery store. He said, I want to go with you. I said, okay. We got to the grocery store, and he said, I want to stay in the car. And I said, okay. And I had to keep the car running. I don't remember if it was hot or cold. And I went in there, and I didn't get everything I wanted. And all of a sudden, things just really started bothering me. And I got back to the car, and I said, this won't work. I'm not going to go to the grocery store today. I said, I'll go tomorrow. So we went back home. Next day, I went to the grocery store. We got there. He said, I want to stay in the car. I said, that won't work. I said, I'll tell you what. You go into the grocery store with me. He couldn't stand up very long. I said, you come into the grocery store with me, and they have some chairs over the pharmacy. And you sit in one of those chairs, and I'll come by there, and you can see me just every few minutes. And then after I get through checking out, I said, and we're ready to go home, I'll get you, and we'll go to the car. He said, okay. That's how we went to the grocery store from then on. He'd do anything I told him to do, and he never complained.
Yeah. You gave him the structure that he needed.
Uh-huh. And just took it day by day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always told him how much I loved him, and that's it.
Yeah. That must have been a hard time for you.
Well, it was, but I didn't mind it.
Yeah, we had to be on our way to the airport.
Because it was easy.
Not a problem there.
Very easy.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Could we come down and
I'd do it all over again.
And coffee filter.
And just two more coffee filters we put out almost till tomorrow morning. Yes.
That was after we were in the
Thank you. Bye-bye.
condo
Yeah.
where your mother lives.
Right.
See?
Yeah.
It's almost
I remember that.
used.
So,
See what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
and he always wanted to go home. If he had to go to the hospital, it was, I want to go home. I want to go home. And I'd say, hon, it'd get to where he couldn't walk. And I couldn't carry him. I couldn't get him out of bed. I couldn't stand him up. I couldn't do anything for him. And he couldn't walk after if I got him standing up. And he was in the hospital for a month one time, not long before he died. And he kept saying, I want to go home, I want to go home. And I said, he wouldn't eat. And I say, I want to go home too. I said, but you have to eat and get some strength so you can start walking again. Because, sweetheart, I can't lift you.
Yeah.
And I said, there's nothing I can do to help you to walk unless you have the strength to do it. And I can help you then. He still wouldn't eat. Well, after a month, they won't keep you in the hospital. So they moved him across the street at that rehabilitation place. And on the way there, he said, I want to go home. I want to go home. And I said, hon, I still can't carry you, but we're going across the street and we are getting closer. And I said, and you can almost see the house. It's right out of your window.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd stay. If it started getting dark, I'd always say, I got to go home. The booger bears will get me. He'd say, okay, I'll see you in the morning. And then he got to where he didn't even answer me when I'd say that, you know, because he was at the end.
Yeah.
No, I was so happy. Ann and Alan would come out and come see me about 10 minutes and then say, we're going over to see Dad. They just got through eating dinner. And then they'd come to our house and they'd stay in there about 10, maybe 15 minutes, but not too long. And then say, we're going on across the street to see Dad. Well, that one night they did that. And then pretty soon, I was in my gown when they came the first time. They called me and they were coming. And I said, well, I've got my gown. And Ann said, that's all right. We've seen it before. And so anyway, that night I had my gown, and so they stayed 10 or 15 minutes. And they going over to see Ray. So pretty soon, I was getting ready for bed. I was washing my face and everything, and doorbell rang. Nobody ever come to my door. Linda will probably tell you, no one ever comes. They don't have peddlers or anything because it's gated and they can't get in. And so anyway, somebody knocked on the door, rang the doorbell. And it kind of scared me, and I went to the door, and I said, who is it? And Alan said, Mom, open the door. So I opened the door, and he said, Dad just died. And God, of course, I started trying to get some clothes on and everything so I could go over with him. So anyway,
because you had stayed with him in the hospital, I think, the night before.
The night before, I tried to spend the night with him.
Yeah.
The bed was only about this wide, and he slept in the middle. And Ann and Linda and Margaret tried to get the sheets and pull him over, but it didn't work. I had about this much bed I was trying to sleep on, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I stayed there till 1 o'clock. And finally I told the nurse, I'm going on home. I said, I just live across the street.
Yeah.
She said, I couldn't bring you a cot in here. And his bed was high and I'd be down here. Well, what good would that do? And I knew I wouldn't sleep.
Yeah.
So I said, I'll come back the first thing in the morning because I just live across the street. And so I came back the next morning, but then the next night was when he passed. And Ann and Alan were with him when he passed away. And when they went in to see him, Ann got on one side of the bed and Alan got on the other. And Ann says, Alan, his fingernails are turning blue. And when Ann said that to him, Alan just leaned forward and he said, Dad, don't worry about Mom and Linda. We'll see that they're taken care of. And I mean, with that, he took a great big deep breath and we let it out, and that was it.
That was it.
And I was so thankful that they were with him.
And he went right after that, didn't he? He took his last breath.
Yeah, I was just thankful somebody was with him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I'm just glad you got to talk to him too, my fellow.
Glad.
He couldn't cut back, but he heard you.
It was I think 10 days before Emma was born.
I know. He died on the 21st. Yeah. But Tim streamed you in as best we could.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to start getting myself ready for a date.
Yeah.